Damasio also discusses a case in which people that have damage to certain parts of the brain, when they become paralyzed, are aware that they're paralyzed and feel great concern. But in his effort to show how important the body is in conjunction with the brain as a system, he brings up other folks that have a defect in which the part of the brain that registers updated images of the body has become dysfunctional. And when people have damage to this part of their brain and they become paralyzed, they don't show any concern. Half their body is paralyzed, they feel nothing, they can't move. Intellectually, they admit that this is true. But after a while, they quickly forget about it because, according to Damasio, their body image is where it was prior to the injury. In other words, the part that updates their body image is broken. So they still perceive themselves as able-bodied, even though intellectually they understand that they're not. The emotional outweighs the intellectual. And this is similar to what happened to the folks I just talked about with damage to the prefrontal cortex. Now, it's extremely hard to even begin to summarize what Damasio is on about. And let me tell you about the structure of this book. The way it's set up is he starts out by mentioning different case histories and facts and studies, and they're kind of presented, and he gives an inkling of what he's all about. And then in the very end of the book, where everything is like loose, he kind of ties it all up. And when he does, it's very intense. And if you weren't paying attention in the beginning to all the brain structures and all the studies and experiments, you could read it and just get an idea of what he's talking about, but you wouldn't really get it. And he makes a lot of footnotes and citations for those that want to go further. It's a damn good book, but it's not, an Oliver Sacks book. It's a completely different kind. And I don't mean any disrespect to Oliver Sacks. It's just a far headier experience. Anyway, there were a few questions that came up, and here's what I got. Vatrad asked, is curiosity a drive? Well, I'm going to give the Damasio answer, and the answer would be yes. Moving toward something that was novel, or moving away from something that was novel, the opposite of curiosity, would be considered a drive and wouldn't have to involve any of the higher functions. OG Bash asked about whether ants have emotions. Damasio did bring up ants and bees, and basically he considered them mechanistic. They don't have the feedback loop into the body, which he considers emotions. So they're kind of mechanistic creatures. Lorella asked about individual differences in folks that have brain injuries. Specifically, what would be more important, the individual characteristics of a person or the location of the brain injuries? And what they have found is that typically it's the brain location where the damage is that predominantly determines how their behavior and thinking patterns result, and not on their personality or pre-existing type of thinking patterns. For example, folks with damage to the prefrontal cortex, it's quite peculiar, almost all take up collecting junk, and they're not sure exactly why, or at least Damasio isn't. Anyway, and finally Dale asked about the amygdala. I had read several of Damasio's papers before I got the book, and he also did studies with the amygdala. Amygdala is a far more primitive structure than the prefrontal cortex. And essentially, there's only been one human case of someone that has had a resection of the entire amygdala. But there are a lot of cases where they have done experiments with rhesused monkeys. And what they find is if you completely remove the amygdala, the startle response of fear of a loud noise or a snake is completely gone. And there is no physiological response either. It's just completely absent. Well, anyway, Descartes' error is a hell of a read, and I strongly recommend it, but not for everyone because it's a tough slog, especially in the end. But if you're interested in this sort of things, it's great. Thanks for listening, folks. Take care.